Apache Bra 28. She was there, motionless with a sign hanging from her neck. Everyone laughed, until he appeared and silence took over. Sold by her own sisters, as if she were nothing. But what that Apache did when he approached silenced even the cruelest. From then on, she would never be invisible again. Watch until the end and see how honor can rescue a life. Subscribe now. The Sunday market in Agua Nova bustled under the stifling sky of the Bahian backlands. Between stalls of brown sugar, flour and crafts, a scene arose that made conversations quiet and gazes converge. Clarice stood there, in the center of the square, her black hair tied in a poorly made braid, simple dress stained with sweat, eyes downcast fixed on the red earth. Around her neck, hung by a coarse string, a wooden board with crooked letters, available for marriage, offers accepted. Her sisters, Rosalva and Marinalva, commented loudly that it was the best destiny for her. Too pretty to stay hidden, but too slow to be useful at home, said Rosalva, with laughter that echoed among the merchants. Marinalva added, Father left 3 daughters and not a penny when he departed. One less mouth is a blessing in these times of drought. Farmer Clemente Montero, a 50-year-old man known for his cattle and lands, observed from a distance, calculating how much the 20-year-old girl who never dared to raise her voice would be worth. Clarice felt each gaze like a needle in her skin. She didn't protest, not because she agreed, but because she had learned that her place was in silence. Since she was little, when her mother left, she had become an easy target for her older sisters. In the small settlement nestled between Caatingas and mountains, many families still treated daughters as currency for exchange. Sheriff Eustaquio passed through the market and pretended not to see what was happening. For him, family matters shouldn't receive external interference. Old Jurema, an herbalist whom everyone respected and feared in equal measure, muttered that, when the river dries up, the fish suffer, but when dignity dries up, the whole land suffers. No one listened to her. The morning advanced and the commotion grew. 3 young men had already offered a goat, a donkey, and even an old radio for the quiet girl. The sisters negotiated, increasing the value, demanding more. Clarice remained static, like a clay figure in the middle of the square. Inside her, however, a small fire burned. It wasn't of declared revolt, but of a sadness so deep that it seemed to burn from within. That's when the market's buzz diminished, conversations lowered to whispers. Through the stalls, a figure who rarely visited the settlement approached. Raoni, a man from the Pataxo tribe who lived in the forests beyond the mountain, walked with firm steps. Tall, skin marked by the sun, black hair cut short. He came to town only to exchange medicinal herbs for salt and tools. His eyes, deep as cave water, stopped at the central scene of the market. He observed Clarice, observed the sign, observed the sisters. No one dared to make a joke when he approached. Raoni was respected and feared. Many believed he knew secrets of the forest that no white man understood. He stopped before Clarice. Without saying a word, he extended his hand and tore the sign from her neck with a precise movement. He broke the wood in 2 pieces. He took from his back a cloak, woven with forest fibers, and covered the young woman's shoulders. Clarice raised her eyes for the first time that day. Their gazes met, not with words or promises, just with recognition, as if both knew what it was to be treated as less than people. "This is no way to treat a daughter of the earth," said Raoni, with a grave voice that seemed to come from the depths of the Caatinga itself. It was his only phrase. Then, with slow but determined gestures, he led Clarice away from the center of the market. She followed him without hesitating, like someone who finally finds a way out of the labyrinth. The sisters were paralyzed for a few moments before Rosalva shouted, "Come back here, she's ours." But no one moved to stop them, not even Sheriff Eustaquio, who observed everything from a distance. Only old Jurema smiled, toothless and mysterious, as if she had already expected that moment. Farmer Clemente clenched his fists, irritated to see his potential investment walking away. "We'll see how long this Indian thinks he can take what's mine," he muttered to his henchmen. In Clarice's small house, where the sisters returned furious, a 5-year-old boy waited sitting on the beaten earth floor. It was Pedrinho, Clarice's son, the fruit of a violence that the settlement pretended not to remember. The boy played with a small wooden horse, the only gift he had received from his mother. His large, dark eyes were identical to hers, carrying the same observant silence. That ungrateful one ran away, Marinalva told the boy. Abandoned you like she abandons everything. Pedrinho just hugged his wooden horse more tightly. In his childish heart, he knew that his mother would never leave him willingly. Beyond the mountain, in the APACHE community, the elders observed the horizon. Donna Irachema, the oldest among them, with deep marks on her face and eyes that had seen more than 90 seasons, smiled at the sky. Today the wind changes direction, she said to no one in particular. When the river meets the stone, it's not the water that breaks, it's the path that changes. The trail through the forest wound between Juremas and Mandacaras. Raoni walked ahead, firm steps that seemed to know every stone of the path. Clarice followed him, still wrapped in the cloak of natural fibers, her body trembling not from fear but from an emotion she couldn't name. Freedom might be the closest word. My son, she finally said, breaking the heavy silence that enveloped them. I can't leave my son. It was the first time her voice sounded full without the usual submissive whisper. Raoni stopped and turned to her. His eyes were like two dark seeds planted in fertile soil. The little one with big eyes, I saw him. We will return for him when the new moon comes. Now, the path is too dangerous. Clarice felt a solitary tear run down her face. Pedrinho was everything she had, her only reason to endure years of humiliation, but something told her that Raoni spoke the truth. The promise in his eyes was firmer than any oath. The path became steeper. They climbed among rocks until they reached a clearing where the Pataxo community had built their dwellings. It wasn't a village like in the history books that Clarice never could read. It was a place where the traditional and the modern met. Mud houses with straw roofs, but also some brick constructions. Children ran freely, women worked with seeds and fibers, men returned from hunting. Everyone stopped to observe Raoni's arrival with the stranger. Donna Irachema was the first to approach. Her steps were slow, supported by a staff of carved wood, but there was an ancestral strength in her presence. She examined Clarice from top to bottom, not with contempt, but with the wisdom of someone who had seen many wounded souls. She bears the mark of pain in her eyes, but also the strength of the earth in her heart, said the elder, lightly touching Clarice's face. Welcome to our people, daughter of the wind. In Raoni's family house, Clarice was received with silent respect. His mother, Janaina, prepared an herb bath to cleanse body and soul. His father, Ubirajara, offered her food without asking questions. Raoni's younger brother, Kawa, a 10-year-old boy with a smart and curious look, observed her from afar, fascinated by the presence of the woman from the city. Meanwhile, in the settlement of Agua Nova, fury was brewing. Clarice's sisters went directly to the sheriff's office, demanding action. That Indian stole our sister, shouted Rosalva, banging on Sheriff Eustachio's desk. And who will take care of the boy now? She has responsibilities. The sheriff scratched his unshaven beard, uncomfortable. He knew the situation was more complex than the sisters painted it. I didn't see anyone being dragged by force, he finally answered, but I'll investigate the case. Clemente Montero, the farmer, entered the sheriff's office at that moment. It's not a matter of investigating, Eustachio. It's a matter of acting. That Indian invaded our market, caused confusion, and took a white girl. That's a crime. And you know it. There was something more in Clemente's eyes beyond civic indignation, a possessive desire, an anger of someone who had something they considered theirs snatched from their hands. The sheriff sighed. He owed favors to Clemente, like almost everyone in the region. His lands provided employment. His influence determined who prospered and who withered. I'll give 3 days, he finally said. If she doesn't return of her own will, we'll organize a search. 3 days is too long, retorted Clemente. In those forests in 3 days, much can happen to an innocent girl. 3 days, repeated the sheriff, firmer this time. This is my final decision. When everyone left the sheriff's office, little Pedrinho, who had followed the aunts without them noticing, remained hidden under the window. His big eyes absorbed everything. His childish mind processed each word. He knew he needed to find a way to warn his mother. In the Pataxo community, 3 days also marked a deadline. The new moon will come in 3 nights, Raoni explained to Clarice, as they walked along the margin of the river that wound near the houses. When it comes, we will perform the Poranchim ritual. Afterward, we will seek your son. Clarice observed the clear waters, so different from the muddy stream that cut through Agua Nova. What is Poranchim? She asked, her Portuguese mixing with regional words. It's when our people gather to dance, sing and strengthen our spirits. It's when we remember who we are and where we came from, he answered, his eyes fixed on the horizon. And why do we need to wait for that to get Pedrinho? Raoni stopped, looking at her directly. Because we will need the strength of everyone to face what's coming. The man of many lands and little honor will not let this pass. I know men like him. For them, everything has a price, even people. Clarice felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew he was talking about Clemente Montero. The farmer had always looked at her like someone measuring the value of a cattle head at the market. That night, around the central fire, the community gathered. Not to judge Clarice or question Raoni's decision, but to share stories. Ubirajara, Raoni's father and respected storyteller, spoke about ancient times when his people dominated all those lands before the fences and the cattle. He spoke about resistance and about adaptation, about losing and rebuilding. His words, cadenced like drum beats, touched something deep in Clarice. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in her pain. From a distance, observing the scene, Donna Irachema smiled. She saw what others couldn't see, an invisible thread beginning to form between Raoni and Clarice. It wasn't romantic love, not yet. It was something more fundamental, recognition. Two souls who in different ways knew marginalization, finding a mirror in each other. The river and the sea meet, muttered the elder, not because they are the same, but because both are water, even flowing in different paths. The second day dawned with a clear sky over the Pataxo community. Clarice awoke in Janaina's small house, where she had been offered shelter. For the first time in years, she had slept without fear. She found Kawa, Raoni's younger brother, waiting for her outside. The boy smiled with all his teeth, holding a small wooden bowl with fresh fruits. "My mother sent this for you," he said, extending the food. "She said that whoever crosses rivers needs strength." Clarice accepted the offer with a shy smile. The metaphorical language of those people still seemed strange to her, but somehow it made sense to her heart. During the morning, Janaina showed Clarice how the women of the community worked with the forest fibers to make baskets, mats, and cloaks like the one that now covered her. Her hands, accustomed to rough work in her sister's house, learned a new type of strength. Precise, patient, creative. In Agua Nova, little Pedrinho woke up earlier than everyone. Without making noise, he took his wooden horse and a piece of bread from the previous night. With the determination that only children possess, he left through the back door, decided to find his mother. He knew the surroundings of the settlement like few did. He had spent many hours exploring while his aunts weren't looking. He knew that the indigenous community was beyond the mountain, near the big river. It was a long path for small legs, but Pedrinho had the strength of hope. What the boy didn't know was that others were also moving that morning. Clemente Montero had gathered 3 of his most loyal men. "We won't wait for the sheriff's 3 days, he instructed, loading an old shotgun. "That Indian needs to learn that nobody takes what's mine." The men departed on horseback, following the trail that led to the Pataxo community. At the sheriff's office, old Jurema appeared unexpectedly, her body bent by the years and her simple clothes contrasted with the strength in her voice. "Blood will stain the earth if you don't act, Eustachio," she said to the sheriff, who received her with impatience. "I don't have time for your prophecies, Jurema," he answered, organizing papers on his desk. "Clemente left armed with his henchmen," insisted the old woman. "It's not prophecy, it's fact. And there's more. Clarice's boy also disappeared this morning." This information made the sheriff raise his eyes. "How do you know that?" "Rosalva and Marinalva are turning the settlement upside down looking for the boy. They say he ran away and that it's his mother's fault." Sheriff Eustachio felt the weight of the situation fall on his shoulders. He had avoided interfering, as he always did in family matters. But now there was a child involved and armed men. He rose with a heavy sigh. "I'll gather some men. We need to prevent a tragedy." In the forest, Pedrinho walked determined, talking to his wooden horse as if the toy could answer. "Mom will be happy to see us, won't she?" he said, jumping over stones in a stream. "And maybe we can stay there forever, away from the angry aunts." The boy didn't notice the dangers around him, neither the wild animals nor the group of armed men who followed in the same direction, just by another path. In the Pataxo community, Raoni was preparing for hunting when Kawa came running. "The birds are restless on the west side," said the boy, breathless. "Many fly low as if fleeing." Raoni knew the signs of nature. Something or someone was approaching, disturbing the harmony of the forest. "Warn the others," he instructed his brother. "Have the women and children gather in the center of the village." CANOE ran to fulfill the order. Raoni sought Clarisse, who was learning to weave with Janaina. "Stay with the others," he told her. "I'll check what disturbs the forest." His eyes conveyed a concern that his words tried to hide. Clarisse felt her heart tighten. "Be careful," she asked, surprising herself with the sincerity in her voice. Raoni nodded and departed with 2 more men from the community. In the central house where everyone gathered, Donna Irachema prepared herbs and chants. "What will happen?" asked Clarisse, sitting beside the elder. "What always happens when different worlds meet," answered the old woman. "Either we learn together, or we suffer apart." Her penetrating gaze fixed on Clarisse. "You carry 2 worlds within you, girl. It's your strength, not your weakness." Before Clarisse could ask the meaning of those words, a commotion began on the east side of the village. Voices rose, not in alarm, but in surprise. Clarisse followed the others to see what was happening. There, at the edge of the clearing, was Pedrinho, his little face dirty with earth, his legs scratched by the thorns of the trail, but his eyes shining upon meeting his mother's. "Mommy!" he shouted, running in her direction with all the strength of his little legs. Clarisse fell to her knees, opening her arms to receive her son. Tears flowed freely down her face as she hugged the small body against hers. "How did you get here, my love?" she asked between sobs of joy. "I followed the river like in the stories you tell," answered the boy, proud, "and my horse showed me the way." He raised the wooden toy as proof of his adventure. Janaina, seeing the scene, approached with a bowl of fresh water. "Your son has a brave heart," she said to Clarisse. "He crossed the forest alone, guided by love." Pedrinho drank the water eagerly, then looked around, fascinated by the new landscape and the different people. "Can we stay here, Mommy?" he asked with the innocence of children. "Here nobody shouts at you." Before Clarisse could answer, a sound cut through the air. A shot, distant but unmistakable. Then another. And shouts. The entire community fell into a tense silence. Donna Irachema rose with difficulty, supported on her staff. "The time of choice has come," she said, her voice firmer than her frail body suggested. "We can no longer postpone the meeting of rivers." Clarisse hugged Pedrinho tightly, fear returning like a familiar shadow. From the other side of the clearing, CANOE appeared running. "White men," he shouted. "Men with guns. Raoni is trying to talk to them, but the big man doesn't want to listen." Clarisse knew who the big man was. Clemente Montero had come to fetch her, not out of any sense of justice, but out of wounded pride and possessiveness. And Raoni was there confronting him, for her. "Take care of Pedrinho," she asked Janaina, handing her son to her. "Please?" The older woman nodded, understanding what Clarisse intended to do. "Mommy, don't go," whimpered Pedrinho, clinging to his mother's skirt. Clarisse knelt again before her son. "I need to help the person who helped us, my love. I promise I'll come back." She kissed his forehead and handed him to Janaina's care. Then, with a determination she never knew she possessed, she walked in the direction of the shots. Donna Irachema observed her, an enigmatic smile on her wrinkled lips. "The seed breaks before becoming a tree," she murmured to herself, "and only then discovers its true strength." At the edge of the forest where the trail opened to the community, a tense scene unfolded. Clemente Montero, upon his imposing horse, pointed the shotgun at Raoni, who remained standing, unarmed, but with the firm posture of someone who would not back down. 2 of the farmer's henchmen kept their weapons ready, while the other 2 men from the community who accompanied Raoni tried to mediate the situation. The birds fell silent in the treetops, as if nature itself awaited the outcome of that encounter. The tension was palpable in the humid air of the forest. "I came to get what's mine," vociferated Clemente, his face red with anger, veins popping on his sweaty forehead. "The girl and the boy come back with me today, or you will regret it." His thick fingers gripped the butt of the shotgun so tightly that the knuckles whitened. Raoni maintained a fixed gaze, showing no fear, his bare feet planted in the red earth, as if from there he extracted his strength. "Nobody here is your property, man of many fences. The woman chose her path, and her path is free." His voice didn't rise but carried the weight of mountains. Clemente laughed with disdain, a harsh sound that cut the air like a knife. "Chose? A woman without a father, without a husband, Without anything, she has no right to choose. It's the sisters' responsibility, and they promised her to me. He spat on the ground as if to emphasize the contempt. I made a good payment, 2 head of cattle and promises of protection. He raised the shotgun a little more, aiming directly at Raoni's chest. The sun filtered through the leaves reflected on the metal barrel. Last chance, Indian. Hand over the girl. It was at that moment that Clarice emerged from the side trail, her small figure but erect as it had never been before. The cloak of natural fibers given by Raoni wrapped her shoulders like a symbolic armor. Her eyes, previously always downcast, now stared directly. "I'm here, Clemente," she announced, her clear voice cutting the tension in the air like a bird's song breaks the silence of dawn. All gazes turned to her. "You don't need to point a gun at anyone. I myself answer for me." A small bird took flight above them, as if announcing an imminent change. The farmer seemed momentarily surprised by the change in posture of the young woman he had always known downcast and silent. The gun lowered a few inches, instinctively. "I see you've learned to speak loudly with these savages," he said, regaining his composure, disdain masking the surprise. "It doesn't matter. You come back with me now. I've arranged everything with your sisters. Marinalva is already preparing your bed and separating new clothes for the boy." Clarice took a few more steps forward, placing herself beside Raoni. The proximity of the two was not of submission or possession, but of alliance, of respect. "I am not merchandise to be arranged or negotiated. I'm not going anywhere against my will, not anymore." Her words, although simple, carried the weight of a lifetime of forced silences. The wind stirred Clarice's loose hair like an invisible blessing. Clemente dismounted his horse with a brusque movement, the fury evident in every tense muscle. The animal whinnied nervously, feeling the owner's anger. "You don't understand, you fool. Without my protection, what will become of you and that little bastard? On my lands you would have food, shelter, respect." He came closer, his eyes bloodshot. "Do you think this Indian will want to raise another man's child? Do you think you'll have an easy life here, sleeping on the ground like an animal?" Raoni, who until then had maintained an impressive calm, finally spoke, his voice grave like distant thunder. "A child of the earth has no owner, has guardians. The boy is welcome among us like his mother. Our houses have earth floors, but our hearts have no fences." His eyes met Clarice's for a brief moment, a silent communication more powerful than any word. Clemente raised his hand as if to slap Clarice, his fingers already forming the arc of imminent violence. Clarice didn't back down, didn't even blink. Years of fear seemed to have evaporated from her being like dew under the strong sun, but the movement was interrupted by a new sound. Horse hooves approaching rapidly, the growing noise breaking the confrontation. Through the same path that the farmer had come, appeared Sheriff Eustachio, accompanied by 3 men from the settlement, and, surprisingly, by old Jurema. Mounted on the rump of one of the horses, her curved but dignified figure contrasted with the urgency of the arrival. "Lower that gun, Clemente," ordered the sheriff, dismounting with impressive agility for a man of his age and volume. "You've crossed all limits. Isn't everything you've already done in that settlement enough? You still come armed to invade someone else's land?" The farmer didn't move, the shotgun still pointed at Raoni. The hand that almost assaulted Clarice now returned to the weapon. "I'm just seeking justice, Eustachio. This woman was promised to me, and this Indian stole her. You are the authority. You must enforce the law." His words sounded like those of a man accustomed to bending the truth in his favor. "Nobody stole anybody," intervened the sheriff, approaching cautiously, his eyes fixed on the gun. "I was there at the market. I saw Clarice leave of her own will." He then turned to the young woman, his gaze softening. "Is it true that you came against your will, girl?" For the first time in her life, Clarice felt that her word had weight, that her voice mattered. The sun that filtered between the leaves seemed brighter, the air lighter in her lungs. "No," she answered firmly, each syllable carrying the certainty of someone who finally found their place. "I came because I chose to come, because here for the first time I am treated as a person, not as a thing. Here my son is not a little bastard, he is a child. Here my silence is not an obligation, it's a choice." The sheriff nodded, something like relief passing over his tired face. "It's resolved then, let's go, Clemente, there's no crime here." A step towards the farmer, hand extended to receive the gun. The farmer didn't lower the shotgun. His bloodshot eyes reflected more than anger. They reflected the frustration of a man accustomed to always getting what he wanted, to stepping on the wills of others like someone stepping on dry leaves. "I'm not leaving without her," he insisted, his voice hardened. "She doesn't know what she wants, never knew." It was then that old Jurema stepped forward, her frail body but her penetrating gaze. Her bare feet, wrinkled by time, advanced without hesitation over the red earth. "Lower that gun, Clemente Montero. Blood stains more than earth. It stains the soul, and your soul already has too many stains to carry one more." She approached him without fear, like someone who has seen too many winters to fear passing storms. "You know whose child that boy is, don't you? Everyone knows, but nobody speaks. The silence of Agua Nova is heavier than lead." The voice of the elder, although low, seemed to echo through the entire clearing. Clemente paled slightly, as if the blood abandoned his face along with his certainty. The old woman continued, eyes fixed on his, challenging him to look away first. 5 years ago, a young woman violated at the harvest festival. A man too powerful to be accused. A boy who carries the same square jaw, the same small and restless eyes, the same birthmark on the right shoulder, the one that looks like a Jurema leaf. The last words were almost whispered, but they hit Clemente like a scream. The farmer finally lowered the weapon, a visible tremor in his rough hands of someone who never needed to ask permission. "Shut up, crazy old woman. You don't know what you're talking about." But his face said otherwise. Each contracted muscle revealed the truth that the words tried to deny. Sheriff Eustaquio looked from Clemente to Jurema, then to Clarice, painful understanding passing through his eyes. The pieces of a dark puzzle finally fitting together. "So that's why," he murmured, more to himself than to others. "That's why you wanted the girl and the boy so much." He turned to the farmer with a new look, hard as stone. "Put that gun away, Clemente, and be thankful I'm not arresting you here and now. Some things not even money can bury forever." At that moment, a small figure burst through the trail. Pedrinho, who had escaped from Janaína's care. He ran to his mother, clinging to her coarse fabric skirt, his bare little feet raising small clouds of dust. "Mommy!" he exclaimed, with the carefree joy that only children possess even in tense moments. His eyes, now visible to everyone in the clearing, were unmistakably similar to Clemente's, not just in color or shape, but in that particular spark, that glow that marks generations like an invisible seal. The farmer looked at the boy, then at Clarice, a complex emotion passing over his face, hardened by the sun and the years. It wasn't just anger or frustration. There was something more. Guilt, perhaps, or the closest a man like him could come to remorse. For a moment it seemed he would say something. His lips parted, his eyebrows momentarily softened. But then, with a brusque movement, he turned, mounted his horse with the agility born of practice, and departed without looking back, the animal raising dust under its hooves. The henchmen looked at each other, astonished, before following their boss in hasty retreat. A heavy silence fell over the clearing, like the silence that follows a storm. It was Donna Irachema who finally emerged from the trail, supported on her staff carved with ancestral symbols. Her presence broke the tension like the first ray of sun after days of rain. "Now is the time of Poranchim," she announced, her voice fragile but firm as an ancient root. Not to celebrate victory over others, but to celebrate victory over fear. She looked directly at Clarice, a soft smile on her face marked by the years, "and to welcome those who have found their true path." The following night, under the new moon that barely insinuated itself in the sky dotted with stars, the Pataxo community performed the Poranchim ritual. Wooden drums covered with animal skin sounded, marking the ancestral rhythm. Voices rose in chants that seemed to come not only from the throats, but from the very bowels of the earth. Bare feet marked the rhythm on the earth, raising dust that danced in the light of the bonfires. Clarice and Pedrinho were invited to the center of the circle. The boy, fascinated by the colors and sounds, smiled without reservations. Donna Irachema painted their faces with red urucum and dark blue genipapo, tracing lines and shapes that told stories older than time itself, symbols of belonging and protection, visual codes that said, "These are of our own." "You are not visitors," declared the elder for the whole community to hear, her voice rising above the drums. "You are part of our people now. The blood that runs in your veins is the same that runs in the earth, sacred and free." The flames of the central bonfire reflected in the eyes of all present, uniting them in a single circle of light and shadow. Raoni approached, bringing two gifts carefully crafted by his own hands. For Pedrinho, a small bow made of flexible wood and fiber string, decorated with colorful feathers. For Clarice, a necklace of forest seeds, each chosen with purpose. Acai seeds for strength, Jarina for protection, Brazil wood for courage, each representing a moon, a cycle, a renewal in the path of life. To remember that there is always a new beginning, he said, his gaze meeting hers with a new understanding. It wasn't just respect now. It was the beginning of something deeper, more true. Sheriff Eustachio, who had been invited to remain for the ritual as a gesture of goodwill, observed everything with moist eyes. The old policeman, who had spent his life turning a blind eye to injustices in the name of order, seemed to be truly seeing for the first time. He approached Clarice when the dance ended and the drums silenced, leaving only the crackling of the fire and the nocturnal song of the crickets. "I ask forgiveness," he said simply, the words difficult for a man accustomed to giving orders, not asking for apologies. "For all the years I turned a blind eye. For each time I saw and pretended not to see." Clarice nodded, accepting his words without resentment. Forgiveness came easily now, like water from a clean source. "Sometimes we need to see through the eyes of others to really see," she replied, lightly touching the sheriff's arm with a hand painted with urucum. "The important thing is that now your eyes are open." 3 moons later, the settlement of Agua Nova received an unexpected visit. Clarice, accompanied by Raoni and Pedrinho, arrived at the Sunday market. They didn't come hidden or fearful, but with heads held high. They brought baskets made by the Pataxo women, carefully dried medicinal herbs, and wild honey in small pottery pots to trade. At first, the residents just observed in silence, as if seeing ghosts. Clarice's sisters kept their distance, shame and resentment mixed in their gazes, but others approached, curious at first, then interested. Old Jurema was the first to buy one of the baskets, declaring in a loud voice that she had never seen such perfect weaving. The gesture opened the way for others to follow. Gradually, the invisible barriers began to fall. Questions were asked, stories exchanged. Pedrinho, now speaking a few words in the Pataxo language mixed with Portuguese, became an involuntary bridge, his innocence melting the ice of prejudice like strong sun on thin snow. He explained to the other boys the meanings of the paintings on his face, proudly showed the small bow that Raoni had given him. At the end of the day, when they returned to the community, Clarice walked side by side with Raoni, no longer behind him as was the custom of many women from the settlement. Between them, Pedrinho hopped like a little bird, holding the hands of both, physically uniting them as they were already united in spirit. "Will we come back next moon?" asked the boy, looking up, his eyes bright with expectation. Raoni smiled, a rare but genuine smile that transformed his austere face. "Yes, little warrior. We will return as many times as necessary to build bridges where there were walls before. That's how different worlds learn to respect each other." Clarice felt a peace she had never known before. Not because everything was perfect. She knew the path would be long, that prejudices of generations wouldn't disappear in a few encounters, but because she finally walked towards something, not running away from something. Because finally, her voice had weight, her existence had purpose. Her silence was a choice, not an imposition. On full moon nights, Donna Irachema used to tell the children of the community the story of the woman who found her voice. She spoke of how Clarice had learned the medicine of plants, how her gentle hands healed wounds of the body and soul, how her ability to heal had become known beyond the mountain, how her son grew strong between two worlds, carrying within himself the promise of a future where different didn't need to be enemies. And she always ended by saying, as the fire lowered and the stars shone more intensely, "You don't need to be born in a place to belong to it. Belonging comes from respect, from love, from the choice to be where the heart finds peace." Years later, when other indigenous communities faced threats from farmers and loggers, it was Clarice who positioned herself as a mediator. Her voice, once silenced, became a bridge between different worlds. She knew the language of both sides, understood the fears and hopes of each. She wasn't a traitor to either, but a guardian of all. And the wooden sign that once hung from her neck, Raoni transformed it into a small drum, carving protection symbols on its edges, stretching thin leather over its surface. It was on this drum that Pedrinho, growing strong and wise, learned the ancestral rhythms that kept alive the memory of his people, of his peoples. What was once a symbol of humiliation had become an instrument of celebration. Because, as Donna Iritema used to say on nights when stories flowed like the river, it's not the object that carries the power, but the meaning we give to it. In the community, at the edge of the river where everything began, where clear waters ran over ancient stones, Clarice finally understood. Her story wasn't about being saved, but about finding the strength that always existed within her. The strength that exists in each person when they find their true path, when they discover their true voice. And that is a story that never really ends. Like the river that flows, changes shape, finds new paths, circumvents obstacles, but always continues, always moves forward. If this narrative about courage, belonging, and renewal touched your heart, don't let it end here. Share in the comments your own journey of self-discovery, or moments when you found your voice. Subscribe to receive more stories that remind us of human strength in the face of adversity and the power of communities that welcome and transform. Leave your like so that these words can reach other hearts that, like rivers, seek their path to the sea. Because every story that resonates in us is a reminder. We are all river, all path, all transformation.